Useless? That's what the teacher whispered. A little girl, shaking, tears rolling down her cheeks, her tiny hands clutching a worn-out bunny, too scared to breathe. But she wasn't just crying because of harsh words. Something darker was happening inside that classroom, behind closed doors. Secrets were buried, scars hidden under her sleeves, a soul silently breaking. Then, he came back. A wounded war hero, a father who thought he'd seen the worst of humanity. But nothing on the battlefield prepared him for this. And when his loyal K9 Max caught the scent of fear, what they uncovered inside the school would shatter everything you thought you knew. The winter sun hung low over Ravenbrook, a small mountain town in Montana. Snow clung stubbornly to the pine branches, and a biting wind swept down the quiet streets, carrying the distant echo of a church bell. The air smelled faintly of pine and frost, and beneath it all was the heavy silence of a town living at its own slow rhythm. Cole Walker, 37 years old, stepped out of his old black Chevy parked near the gates of Ravenbrook Elementary School. He was a tall man, about 6'2", broad-shouldered but lean after months of hospital food. His dark brown hair, now grown longer than military regulation, peeked from beneath a plain wool beanie. A thick, faintly graying beard traced the line of his jaw. His once clear hazel eyes seemed clouded with shadows that didn't belong to this town. They belonged to Afghanistan, where 6 months ago he'd been pulling his wounded brothers out of a smoldering ambush site under enemy fire. 12 lives saved, dozens of scars earned. He carried them all like ghosts stitched beneath his skin. Cole's right leg still bore the memory of shrapnel, and he limped slightly as he walked. At his side padded Max, a 5-year-old German Shepherd K9 with a thick coat of black and tan fur, amber eyes sharp and alert, ears always flicking toward distant sounds. Max had once been Cole's partner during his deployment, a bomb detection and rescue dog, trained to hear trouble before it arrived. Unlike Cole, Max didn't limp, but a faint scar ran along his left shoulder, hidden under the dense fur. Max was disciplined but affectionate, fiercely loyal to Cole, and unusually sensitive to human emotions, traits that had saved their lives more than once. Cole tugged at the strap of his worn brown jacket and exhaled into the frigid air. He hadn't planned to come here straight from the hospital, but something in his gut, the same instinct that had kept him alive on battlefields where seconds meant survival, pulled him to this place. He wanted to surprise Lily, his 9-year-old daughter, pick her up, and walk her home himself. Lily Walker had always been his sunshine, a small, delicate girl with pale, freckled cheeks and long, straight, chestnut-brown hair she usually tied into loose braids. She had large gray-blue eyes, Amelia's eyes, her late mother's eyes, that always made Cole's chest ache when he looked at her. Lily was bright and thoughtful, but ever since Amelia's sudden death in a car accident 2 years ago, something inside her had changed. She laughed less, spoke softer, and sometimes stared into nothing, as though looking for someone she knew would never come back. While Cole was in Afghanistan, she had stayed with her Aunt Grace, and though Grace took care of her, he couldn't shake the feeling he'd failed her when she needed him most. Pushing open the glass doors, Cole entered the warm hallways of Ravenbrook Elementary. It smelled faintly of crayons, pencil shavings, and lemon-scented cleaner. He glanced around. The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly, and the hallway stretched long and empty except for the faint echoes of distant chatter. He glanced at the wall clock. Nearly 5 p.m. Most of the kids had already gone home. He adjusted his grip on the small stuffed rabbit in his hand, a worn-out bunny with one floppy ear Lily used to carry everywhere when she was little. She had left it at home that morning, and he thought it might make her smile to see it. Max padded silently beside him, tail low but eyes alert. His ears twitched at every creak, and he sniffed the air cautiously, as if already sensing something Cole couldn't. As Cole approached the door labeled Classroom 4B, he noticed it was slightly ajar. A thin sliver of muted light escaped through the crack. Voices murmured softly inside. He slowed his steps, frowning. Through the narrow gap, he spotted Lily, sitting alone at the very back of the classroom. Her small frame seemed swallowed by the wooden chair. Her head bowed so low, her chin nearly touched her chest. Her long braids hung forward, covering her face, and her arms were wrapped tightly around herself, as though trying to hold something inside. Her small shoulders shook almost imperceptibly. Standing close beside her was Rowan Kincaid, Lily's homeroom teacher. Rowan was a woman in her early 40s, of medium height, with softly curled dark auburn hair cut just above her shoulders. Her makeup was impeccable, foundation smooth, eyeliner precise, deep crimson lipstick that gave her a poised elegance at first glance. Her fitted charcoal gray dress and polished low heels made her look refined and collected, the image of a teacher admired by parents. But there was something cold in her perfectly arched brows, and her eyes, sharp, calculating, a shade of steel blue, hid an edge beneath the sweet smile she wore like a mask. Cole's frown deepened. Rowan leaned in closer, bending over slightly so that her mouth hovered just near Lily's ear. Her hand rested lightly on Lily's back, almost appearing comforting, but Cole's gut twisted. The tension in Lily's posture told him that this wasn't comfort. Max froze beside him, ears up, fur bristling faintly, his amber gaze locked on Rowan. A low, barely audible rumble of a growl vibrated deep in the dog's throat. Cole gently pushed the door open. The hinges groaned softly, a sighing sound that broke the fragile silence. Lily startled, flinching upright. Her big gray-blue eyes darted up at him, rimmed with red as though she'd been crying, though she quickly blinked away the moisture and forced a small, trembling smile. "Dad?" Her voice was almost a whisper, cracked and uneven. Cole crossed the room in long, steady strides. Max close at his heels, silent but watchful. He crouched down next to Lily, reaching out gently to tuck a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "What's wrong, honey?" His voice was soft, the same voice he used to calm soldiers mid-panic on a battlefield. Lily shook her head quickly, her fingers clutching the edge of her desk. Nothing's wrong. I'm just a little tired." From behind, the click of heels approached slowly. Rowan straightened, stepping forward with a pleasant, practiced smile plastered on her lips. "Mr. Walker," she said warmly, her voice smooth like honey, but oddly too polished. "Lily was just a little emotional today. She missed you terribly and had a tough time during math class. I was comforting her." Cole studied her carefully, saying nothing. Up close, he noticed faint creases beneath Rowan's perfect foundation, the kind carved by years of forcing expressions she didn't mean. After a moment, he gave a slight nod, his jaw tight. "I see." He turned back to Lily, brushing her shoulder lightly. "Come on, sweetheart, let's go home." Lily gripped his hand instantly. Not the casual, joyful grip of a child seeing her father after a long day, but the desperate clutch of someone clinging to safety in deep waters. Cole's chest tightened. As they walked toward the door, he glanced back over his shoulder. Rowan still stood where she was, hands clasped neatly in front of her, that same serene smile fixed in place. But her eyes followed them, cold and unblinking, like a predator watching prey walk away. Max looked back too, lips drawn back slightly, teeth just peeking beneath his muzzle. A single low growl rumbled, so soft only Cole heard it. He placed a calming hand on Max's neck, but didn't shush him. In that silent exchange between man, dog, and teacher, Cole knew. Something was wrong. Very wrong. 3 weeks earlier, Ravenbrook was still buried under thick layers of snow, its narrow roads coated in icy frost. The nights were longer, the mornings colder, and the silence around Cole Walker's home felt heavier than usual. While he was still recovering from his injuries at the VA hospital, his 9-year-old daughter, Lily Walker, had been living with her aunt, Grace Bennett. Grace, in her mid-30s, was a tall and slender woman with soft blonde hair that she usually tied back into a simple bun, pale, freckled skin, and calm hazel eyes that held quiet strength. A registered nurse at the local clinic, Grace had always carried an air of composure and patience, but beneath that was someone still learning how to navigate her own grief after her sister Amelia's death, the car accident that had shattered their family. Since then, she had stepped in to care for Lily whenever Cole was deployed, but she often worried that she could never replace the warmth Lily lost. In those 3 weeks, Grace had begun noticing subtle changes in Lily's behavior. The little girl had grown quieter, barely touching her food, and at night, Grace often found her curled up tightly under the blanket, clutching the frayed-eared stuffed bunny Amelia had given her before she died. Sometimes Lily would whisper in her sleep, broken fragments like, "I didn't do anything wrong," and "Please don't be mad." At school, Rowan Kincaid, Lily's homeroom teacher, presented an entirely different image to the parents. On the outside, Rowan, a woman in her early 40s with perfectly styled auburn curls and precise crimson lipstick, projected warmth and professionalism. To the parents, she was the teacher everyone praised for her gentle guidance and modern teaching techniques. But behind closed doors, Rowan's demeanor shifted entirely. Her once smooth voice turned sharp as glass, her gaze cut coldly through children, and her perfectly manicured nails, polished in deep crimson, were quick to grip, pinch, or yank when the doors were shut. The first incident came on a Tuesday morning. The class had been working on their weekly math drills when Lily accidentally spilled her water cup across her desk. The noise was small, but in the tense quiet of the classroom, it might as well have been thunder. Rowan's heels clicked softly against the wooden floor as she walked toward Lily's desk. She crouched slightly, one hand resting casually on Lily's shoulder, her perfectly applied lipstick curling into a sweet smile, one meant to deceive. "Clumsy, aren't we, Lily?" she whispered, her breath sharp against the child's ear. "Just like your mother?" Lily froze, her pale fingers trembling as she reached for a rag. Before she could wipe the desk clean, Rowan's crimson-painted nails pinched the soft skin of Lily's upper arm, light enough to leave no visible mark, but firm enough to sting like a silent warning. From the back of the class, Elena Ruiz, the student teacher assigned to shadow Rowan for the semester, stiffened in her chair. Elena was 23, petite, with straight black hair that reached her shoulders, warm brown skin, and sharp dark eyes that missed very little. Originally from Albuquerque, she had joined the teaching program to pursue her dream of working with children, but her time in Rowan's classroom had unsettled her deeply. She noticed Lily's reaction immediately, the slight jerk of her shoulder, the way her gray-blue eyes dimmed behind lowered lashes, the way she bit her lower lip hard enough to leave a mark. Elena scribbled something into the small leather notebook she always carried. Pinched arm, emotional shutdown, Rowan smiling. That afternoon, Bethany Cole, the school nurse, made another quiet entry in her own records. Bethany, in her late 30s, was a short woman with curly dark brown hair, glasses perched constantly at the tip of her nose, and a warm, gentle demeanor that made children naturally trust her. Over the past month, Bethany had noticed a pattern, tiny bruises forming along Lily's wrists, faint scratches on her upper arms, subtle swelling in her palms where she clenched her fists too tightly. None of the injuries were serious, but when paired with Lily's avoidance of eye contact and her frequent headaches, Bethany's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. But instincts weren't evidence, and in schools like Ravenbrook Elementary, without evidence, you learn to stay silent. 2 weeks later, the tension grew thicker. Rowan's behavior didn't stop. It escalated. She had perfected the art of acting sweet in public, saving her sharp whispers and small cruelties for moments when no adults were watching. She would lean over Lily's desk, her perfume strong and cloying, and murmur, "Why do you even try, Lily? You're embarrassing yourself." One afternoon, Elena caught Lily flinching again, not from words this time, but from touch. Rowan brushed the back of her fingernails against Lily's neck as she leaned in to check her handwriting. Lily's whole body stiffened like she was bracing for impact. Elena's stomach twisted. She wrote another note, this time underlining the words, "Pattern confirmed. Intimidation." That same week, Grace had driven Lily to school, her old blue Subaru leaving faint tire marks in the snow. Sitting in the car, she glanced into the rearview mirror, catching Lily hugging her backpack tightly to her chest, small knuckles white from the grip. "Sweetheart," Grace said gently, brushing a strand of blonde hair from her face, "you've been so quiet lately. Is something wrong at school?" Lily hesitated, chewing on her lower lip, her big gray-blue eyes flicking away from Grace's gaze. "I'm fine, Auntie Grace," she murmured softly, then hugged her bunny tighter. Grace swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a smile, deciding not to press further, for now. But she wasn't the only one sensing something. That same morning, Cole stopped by the school to finalize Lily's early pickup schedule before returning to his rehabilitation program. He had brought Max with him, wanting to take the dog for a walk afterward. As they approached the courtyard, Max suddenly stopped mid-step. His sharp amber eyes locked onto something in the distance, fur bristling as his body stiffened. Cole followed his gaze, spotting Lily standing at the doorway of classroom 4B, Rowan towering behind her. The teacher's hand rested lightly on Lily's shoulder, but Max's low, guttural growl rumbled like thunder, deep and instinctive. Cole gently touched the side of Max's neck. "Easy, buddy," he whispered. But his own instincts, the same ones that had saved him and 12 others in Afghanistan, were firing like alarm bells. Rowan noticed them watching. Her crimson lips curled into a warm, practiced smile, and she waved lightly. To anyone else, it looked innocent. To Cole, it looked rehearsed. Lily spotted her father and broke into a small, fleeting smile of relief before Rowan nudged her back inside. Cole's jaw tightened, his breath clouding in the frozen air. Max took another step forward, placing himself slightly ahead of Cole, his tail stiff, ears pricked, body poised. Not an aggression, but protection. That moment told Cole everything he needed to know. Max had sensed it too. When they got back to the truck, Cole sat silently in the driver's seat, staring out the windshield while Max rested his head on his lap. The quiet between man and dog wasn't empty. It was loaded with unspoken understanding. Cole stroked Max's fur absently, his thoughts racing. Something was happening at Ravenbrook Elementary. Something small enough to hide, but dangerous enough to leave Lily's shoulders trembling in silence. And he was going to find out what it was. The next day at Ravenbrook Elementary, the snow outside had begun to thaw slightly under a rare patch of pale sunlight. But inside classroom 4B, the air was colder than the winter wind itself. Oliver Gray, a quiet 9-year-old boy who often sat 2 rows behind Lily Walker, adjusted his small wire-rimmed glasses as he hunched over his notebook. Oliver was smaller than most of the other boys in class, with messy chestnut brown hair that always fell into his hazel eyes, and a nervous habit of chewing on his lower lip whenever he concentrated. Unlike most children his age, Oliver rarely spoke unless spoken to. But beneath his shy demeanor was a clever, observant mind that remembered details others ignored. His parents, both accountants who worked late, had raised him to be polite, respectful, and reserved. But loneliness had made him watchful. And today, it made him brave. He had been watching Lily closely for weeks now, noticing the way her hands shook when she held her pencil, the way she always hesitated before answering questions, the way her gray-blue eyes sometimes clouded with something heavy and unspoken. Today, however, was different. Lily's trembling worsened when Rowan Kincaid, their teacher, leaned down to help her with an assignment, her crimson-painted nails grazing Lily's wrist. Oliver's chest tightened. He knew the pattern by now, the soft whispers, the subtle touches, and Lily's shrinking frame every time Rowan's shadow loomed over her desk. Rowan's presence filled the room. Not loud, but oppressive, her heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, her perfume sharp and lingering in the air. To the untrained eye, she was composed elegance, a neatly tailored navy dress, auburn curls framing her sharp cheekbones, her smile polished and warm. But Oliver had seen her eyes, steel blue, sharp, calculating, and he recognized the cruelty behind the mask. As Rowan leaned closer to Lily, Oliver's small fingers dug into his pocket, pulling out an old, slightly scratched smartphone. It was his father's old device, one he secretly borrowed that morning after overhearing Grace talking about Lily's recent mood swings when she picked her up the day before. With a shaky breath, Oliver unlocked the screen, opened the recording app, and slid the phone carefully under his desk, pressing record. "You're a disgrace to your father," Rowan's whisper cut through the quiet like a blade, her voice cold and venomous, meant only for Lily's ears. "Useless, just like her." Oliver froze, eyes wide, fighting the urge to look up. Lily's head remained bowed, but her tiny shoulders quivered, her lips pressing tightly together as if holding back a sob. Rowan straightened moments later, her heels tapping softly as she walked to the front of the classroom, smiling like nothing had happened. The recording captured everything. At lunch, Oliver waited until the room was nearly empty before approaching Elena Ruiz, the young student teacher who had been shadowing Rowan since the start of the semester. Elena was sitting at the back, her dark hair falling over her shoulder, as she organized lesson plans in a small leather-bound binder. "Elena," Oliver whispered, his voice barely audible, his round cheeks flushed red from the effort of speaking up. Elena looked up from her papers, startled. "Hey, Oliver, what's wrong?" Oliver glanced around cautiously, ensuring no one was nearby. He slid the phone across the table, his small hands trembling. I recorded what she said to Lily. Elena hesitated, her almond-shaped dark eyes narrowing as she unlocked the phone and pressed play. As Rowan's icy words hissed through the tiny speaker, Elena's spine stiffened and her grip on the device tightened. Her breath caught, a faint shiver running down her arms. "I knew it," she whispered to herself, jaw tightening. "I knew something was happening." Within the hour, Elena found Bethany Cole, the school nurse, in her small office adjacent to the nurse's station. The office was cozy but cluttered, with stacks of folders, a small desk lamp, and shelves lined with neatly labeled medicine boxes. Bethany, a short woman with curly brown hair and round glasses, looked up from a set of charts, her soft hazel eyes tired but kind. "Bethany," Elena said quickly, closing the door behind her, "you need to hear this." She played the recording again, and Bethany's expression darkened. She removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose with her fingertips, then sighed deeply. "That's exactly what I was afraid of," Bethany murmured. She reached for a folder, pulling out Lily's medical chart and spreading it open on her desk. She traced her finger across the notes she'd made over the past 6 weeks. Faint bruises on Lily's wrists, scratches on her upper arms, migraines, anxiety. "Every single one of these matches days Lily was in Rowan's class," Bethany said gravely. "Every one." Elena stared at the chart, her pulse racing. "We have evidence now. This can't be ignored anymore." That evening, Cole Walker sat at the kitchen table in his small wooden house, the lights dim and soft. He had just returned from the VA Rehabilitation Center, his muscles aching, his scars pulling under the weight of his sweatshirt. Across the table, Lily sat quietly, tracing circles on her plate with the edge of her fork, her gray-blue eyes distant. Max lay sprawled under the table, his massive frame curled comfortably, but his amber eyes watched Lily intently, sensing the tension radiating from her tiny body. Every few minutes, he nudged her leg gently with his cold nose, earning a small absent-minded pat on the head. Grace Bennett, Cole's sister-in-law, stood by the counter making tea, her blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail. Her calm demeanor faltered as she glanced back at Lily, her brows knitting with worry. Elena had called Cole earlier, asking if she could stop by. When the knock came at the door, Cole rose slowly, his leg aching from the long day, and opened it to find Elena standing there with her binder tucked tightly under one arm. Her petite frame was tense, and her usually steady hands were trembling slightly. "Mr. Walker," she began softly, stepping inside, "there's something you need to hear." She handed him Oliver's phone. Cole frowned, pressing play, and as Rowan's venomous words spilled into the quiet room, he felt his stomach knot. Max stirred instantly, his ears perking sharply, fur along his back rising as he let out a low, warning growl. Cole glanced down, placing a calming hand on the dog's neck, his own chest tightening with the same instinctive recognition. Lily looked up timidly, confusion flickering across her face, but she didn't ask what was happening. She didn't need to. Cole took a deep breath, his jaw tightening as he leaned back against the chair. "That's enough," he said finally, his voice low and steady, but carrying the weight of restrained fury. "This ends now." Elena met his gaze, her expression resolute despite the tremor in her voice. "I'll help you, and Bethany's ready to back us up, but we need to move carefully." Cole nodded, his hand resting on Max's thick fur. "Careful, yes," he said quietly, hazel eyes darkening as though staring into another battlefield. "But we move forward. No more silence." Max's ears flicked, tail thumping softly against the floor, as though sensing a battle was about to begin. That night, Cole sat by the window long after Lily went to bed, the soft glow of the street lamp casting shadows across his face. He replayed Rowan's words in his mind, every syllable sinking deeper like shrapnel. He had faced insurgents, snipers, and ambushes, but this, protecting his daughter, felt heavier than any battlefield. For the first time in months, the soldier in him stirred. It was time to fight. Cole Walker sat at his kitchen table late into the night, the soft glow of a single lamp spreading across a clutter of notes, dates, and photographs. His strong, weathered hands, scarred from years of battle, moved methodically as he created a map of connections. Each faint bruise on Lily's arms, each trembling answer in class. Each day Rowan Kincaid had been present. His handwriting was sharp and precise, mirroring the disciplined man who once navigated minefields with soldiers' lives depending on him. Now, this battlefield was different, but no less dangerous. Beside him, Max lay stretched out, his large black and tan body coiled like a shadow, amber eyes following Cole's every move. At 5 years old, Max was a seasoned K9, built powerfully but graceful in his movements. His intelligence was uncanny. He seemed to sense tension before Cole voiced a thought, his ears flicking at subtle shifts in the air. When Cole paused to take a sip of black coffee, Max raised his head, resting it briefly on Cole's knee, a quiet reassurance that they were in this fight together. Cole flipped open his small green field notebook, one he'd carried since Afghanistan. He had already recorded every relevant date, cross-referenced Bethany's medical logs with Elena's observation notes, and highlighted patterns. Nearly every injury Lily had suffered matched days when Rowan had been alone with the class. Still, without something undeniable, Rowan would remain untouchable. The next afternoon, Cole returned to Ravenbrook Elementary under the pretense of updating Lily's pickup schedule. Max trotted quietly at his side, his tail held low, blending into Cole's steady gait. The school hallways were quiet, a faint hum from the overhead lights, the only sound breaking the silence. As Cole neared the administrative wing, he slowed at the sound of muffled voices spilling from a partially closed door. The gold-plated name on the wood read, Meeting Room 2. He motioned subtly for Max to stay low, and the dog immediately dropped into a crouch, his body tense but silent, ears twitching like miniature radar dishes. Inside, Rowan's voice cut through faintly, sharp and cold even in whispers. If any of those kids open their mouths, I have ways to make them stop. Her tone was stripped of the honeyed sweetness she showed parents. This was her real voice, raw and chilling. Cole's jaw clenched, a familiar instinct rising, the same one that had kept him alive overseas when ambushes hid behind silence. Slowly he crouched lower against the wall, pulling his phone from his jacket pocket and unlocking the recording app with practiced precision. With one motion, his thumb slid across the screen. The small digital counter started ticking upward silently. Rowan continued, her words biting, deliberate. Kids are easy to control. You scare them enough, they won't say a word. No one's going to believe them over me anyway. Their parents are too busy, too distracted, too tired. Cole's chest tightened, fury curling under his ribs, but he didn't move. Max, still pressed flat against the ground, flicked his ears at every word, as though he understood the gravity of each syllable. Then came the threat that solidified everything. Rowan's voice lowered, but it was clear. Lily's already halfway broken. If she tries to talk, I'll make sure she regrets it. Cole's hands tightened around the phone until his knuckles whitened. Max shifted subtly, emitting a low rumble deep in his throat. A predator's warning, quiet but lethal. Cole rested a calming hand on Max's shoulder and waited until Rowan stopped speaking. Then, still crouched, he slowly backed away down the hall until the voices faded. The recording was short, 53 seconds, but Cole knew it was enough to connect all the pieces. That evening, Cole gathered Elena Ruiz, Bethany Cole, and Grace Bennett in his small living room, its walls lined with old photos of Amelia and Lily from happier years. Grace, in her soft blue cardigan and jeans, sat curled at the edge of the couch, her slender fingers twisting nervously in her lap. Elena sat cross-legged on the armchair, dark eyes sharp but clouded with exhaustion, her leather notebook open in her lap. Bethany, carrying her binder stuffed with Lily's medical logs, leaned forward on the coffee table, her short curly hair tied back, her glasses slipping low on her nose. Cole connected his phone to the small Bluetooth speaker on the shelf and pressed play. Rowan's voice filled the room, cold, ruthless, stripped bare of pretense. Grace's breath hitched. "My God," she whispered, one hand rising instinctively to her mouth. Elena clenched her fists against her knees. "That's it," she said firmly, her petite frame seeming taller as her voice steadied. "This is proof." Bethany flipped quickly through Lily's records, pulling out a highlighted chart. Every bruise, every stress headache, they match perfectly with days Rowan was alone with the class, she said quietly, her soft voice heavy with restrained anger. Cole nodded slowly, setting the phone on the table, his broad shoulders tense beneath his worn gray sweater. "This isn't just about Lily anymore. She's been hurting other kids too. We can't handle this quietly." Elena glanced toward Grace, her voice steady, but empathetic. Grace, are you okay with us escalating this? It might get messy. Rowan's got influence with the school board. Grace's hazel eyes were glossy, but her voice didn't waver. I want Lily safe. Do whatever we have to. Max, lying on the rug between Cole and Elena, shifted slightly, his intelligent amber eyes scanning each person in turn. When the recording played again, his ears pricked sharply, and he let out a low, deliberate huff, like a silent acknowledgement of the threat. Bethany tapped her pen against the edge of her binder, breaking the silence. The school board won't act without an overwhelming case. We need statements. We need parents. Elena leaned forward, tapping the page of her notebook. Oliver's recording, my observations, Bethany's medical logs, this new file. We already have a strong foundation, but I've seen 2 other kids flinch the same way Lily does when Rowan leans over them. Names? Cole asked, his voice firm but even. Sophie Taylor and Mason Price, Elena said. Bethany nodded faintly. Sophie's 10. She came in with headaches last week and asked for ice for her wrist. Mason, 8, has started missing school. His mom called to say he's been complaining of stomach pain almost daily. Cole reached for his pen, writing both names neatly on his notepad. His mind worked like it had in combat zones. Strategic, systematic, unrelenting. We'll talk to their parents, carefully. Grace exhaled softly, leaning back into the couch. And what happens when Rowan realizes we're moving against her? Cole's gaze hardened, the muscles along his jaw tightening. Then we stay ahead of her. Max and I will handle that. At his name, Max's ears flicked, tail thumping once against the rug, his silent promise to protect resonating louder than words ever could. By the end of the night, the plan was set. Elena would quietly gather observations from other students. Bethany would update the medical logs and prepare formal statements. Grace would document Lily's emotional episodes at home. And Cole would be ready. When everyone left, Cole knelt beside Max, his fingers combing through the thick fur along the dog's neck. Good work today, he whispered softly, the weight of his words layered with gratitude and resolve. Max leaned his head into Cole's chest, his steady heartbeat matching the quiet rhythm of the man who had been forged on battlefields and was ready to fight another one, this time for his daughter. Tomorrow, the real confrontation would begin. The following afternoon, the icy winds sweeping through Ravenbrook carried the scent of pine and fresh snow. The streets were quiet, but inside a small lakeside cafe named Maple Haven, a storm of a different kind was brewing. The cafe, with its rustic brick walls, warm amber lighting, and soft aroma of roasted coffee beans, served as the meeting place for those who had decided they could no longer stay silent. Cole Walker arrived first, his tall frame wrapped in a dark brown jacket, his hazel eyes sharp and unwavering. A fresh cut across his jawline from shaving made his features look even more chiseled under the dim lights. Beside him, Max moved quietly, his thick black and tan fur glinting faintly beneath the golden lamps. The German shepherd's amber gaze swept the room instinctively, tail low but steady, as if he sensed the importance of what was about to happen. Soon after, Grace Bennett entered, adjusting the soft wool scarf around her slender neck. Her blonde hair was neatly tied back in a loose bun, her pale skin flushed from the cold. She offered Cole a small nod before settling into the chair opposite him, folding her hands tightly on the table, hiding her nervousness beneath a composed exterior. Elena Ruiz followed, her petite frame bundled in a navy pea coat, dark brown eyes alert despite the weariness beneath them. In her hands was a leather-bound notebook, the edges of several sticky notes peeking out like bookmarks to vital pieces of evidence. Lastly came Bethany Cole, the school nurse, her round glasses fogged slightly from the winter air. She carried a bulging canvas bag filled with carefully organized medical reports, each tab marked with names, dates, and colored labels for different levels of injury. Her curly brown hair was tied back messily, and there was a quiet determination in her expression. They weren't alone. For the first time, several other parents had joined the table, each wearing the same mix of exhaustion and resolve. Among them was Harper Taylor, Sophie's mother, a tall, elegant woman in her early 40s with shoulder-length chestnut hair, high cheekbones, and a graceful posture that contrasted the slight tremor in her hands. Across from her sat Daniel Price, Mason's father, a stocky man in his late 30s with rough hands, sandy blonde hair cropped close, and a neatly trimmed beard. His deep-set green eyes burned with anger that he tried, unsuccessfully, to hide. Cole leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, his voice steady and calm. "Thank you for coming. I know this isn't easy for any of you, but we have to face this together." Harper's voice trembled as she clasped her hands tightly. "I thought Sophie was just sensitive, but then she started crying at night, saying she didn't want to go to school anymore. She's been waking up from nightmares, saying she's coming." Her voice broke, and she pressed a tissue to her lips. Daniel clenched his fists against the table, his jaw rigid. "Mason hasn't been the same either. He says his stomach hurts every morning, refuses to get dressed for school. He won't say what's wrong, but now I know." He exhaled shakily, his shoulders broad beneath his plaid flannel shirt, the weight of a father's guilt sinking into his rough features. Elena opened her notebook, flipping to a page marked in red. "Oliver Gray gave us 2 more recordings," she said, glancing at Cole. "They confirm what we've suspected. Rowan systematically targets specific children, shaming them, belittling them, making sure they're too scared to speak." Bethany slid a folder across the table, her voice quiet but steady. "And these," she said, tapping the documents with her index finger, "are 8 additional medical logs, bruises, headaches, stress rashes. Every single one matches days Rowan had prolonged contact with those kids." Grace brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, her soft hazel eyes glimmering with restrained anger. "How long has this been going on without anyone noticing?" "Too long," Cole answered simply, his voice carrying the weight of suppressed fury. He picked up one of the folders, flipping through photographs of small bruises and scribbled incident notes. His jaw tightened as he skimmed the pages, the soldier in him processing the data like battle intel. For a moment, silence settled over the group, broken only by the faint hum of the espresso machine in the background. Max shifted slightly beneath the table, laying his massive head gently on Lily's scuffed sneakers, where she sat quietly beside Grace. Lily, her long chestnut-brown hair tied in loose braids, clutched her frayed-eared stuffed bunny tightly in her lap. The soft rise and fall of her chest hinted at the effort she was making to keep her tears contained. Cole rested a hand lightly on Max's back. The dog gave a soft exhale and pressed his nose against Lily's ankle, grounding her with his steady warmth. Harper glanced toward Cole, her voice steadier now. "So what happens next? The principal?" Elena shook her head immediately, the dark strands of her bob grazing her cheeks. "If we go through the school administration, they'll bury this. Rowan has influence. The board has ties to her through other parents. They'll protect her." Bethany adjusted her glasses, nodding. "She's right. I've seen reports dismissed before. If we want change, we have to go higher." Cole leaned back in his chair, folding his arms across his chest, his voice low but resolute. "We take this beyond Ravenbrook Elementary. We file a formal case directly with the Ravenbrook Department of Education and the Child Protection Agency. No intermediaries, no loopholes." Daniel's green eyes hardened with renewed determination. "Then we fight. For our kids." The table grew quiet, the weight of their decision settling heavily in the warm air. Cole looked around, his hazel eyes meeting each person's gaze in turn. "We're not just protecting Lily anymore," he said softly but firmly. "This is for every child Rowan has ever hurt, and for the ones she hasn't yet." Grace reached across the table, her slender hand resting over Cole's, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're not alone in this." Elena closed her notebook with a decisive snap. "I'll draft a summary of everything we have so far. The recordings, the medical records, the eyewitness accounts. Once it's ready, we'll deliver it together." Bethany nodded. "I'll add the medical confirmations and sign my name on it. I've seen enough." Cole gave a short nod of approval, his shoulders relaxing slightly, but his expression still grim. "Then we move fast. Every day we wait is another day she has power." As the group rose from the table, Max stood too, stretching his muscular frame, ears pricked as though ready for commands. He walked alongside Lily as they left the cafe, his massive body brushing her small frame protectively. Cole slipped his hand into the pocket of his jacket, where his small green field notebook rested, already filled with dates, evidence, and names. The soldier in him was awake now. Tonight they had built an alliance. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The winter storm had calmed over Ravenbrook, But the tension inside the Department of Education's administrative building was thicker than the frost clinging to the windows. The sleek glass structure, standing at the edge of town, carried an air of formality and authority. Its polished marble floors reflected the fluorescent lights above, and the faint hum of distant radiators filled the silence in the hallway outside the hearing room. Cole Walker adjusted the collar of his dark charcoal jacket, his hazel eyes steady but sharp, scanning the corridor as if assessing a battlefield. His tall frame seemed carved from stone, his rugged features accentuated by faint shadows under his eyes. The weight of sleepless nights etched across his face. Beside him, Max stood poised, a muscular black and tan German Shepherd K9, ears pricked forward, amber eyes locked on the heavy oak doors ahead. Max's steady stance, silent and watchful, was both comforting and commanding, a guardian's presence embodied in fur and muscle. Inside the room, the emergency disciplinary hearing had already begun. The air carried the mixed scent of paper, ink, and tension. At the center sat a long mahogany table surrounded by 8 members of the Ravenbrook Board of Education, including its chairwoman, Margaret Sloan, a dignified woman in her late 50s with neatly pinned silver-gray hair, pale skin, sharp cheekbones, and an air of authority softened by her calm, deliberate tone. Known for her integrity and meticulous nature, Margaret had overseen countless hearings, but rarely one this serious. To her right sat Alan Whitaker, the board's legal advisor, a slender man in his early 60s with thinning white hair, round glasses, and a habit of tapping his pen rhythmically against the table whenever he grew impatient. On Margaret's left was Carla Mendoza, a petite woman in her early 40s with olive-toned skin, jet-black bobbed hair, and an empathetic gaze that hinted at her own experience as a parent of 2. Cole, Grace Bennett, Elena Ruiz, Bethany Cole, and 4 other parents, including Harper Taylor and Daniel Price, took their seats at one end of the table. A thick binder rested before Cole, containing the culmination of weeks of relentless effort. Oliver's recordings, Bethany's medical reports, Elena's observation notes, and testimonies from affected families. On the opposite side, Rowan Kincaid sat stiffly, dressed in a deep wine-red blazer paired with a fitted black skirt, her auburn curls styled into immaculate waves. Her striking steel-blue eyes, once a weapon behind polite smiles, now glinted coldly beneath carefully applied makeup. At first glance, Rowan looked confident, even defiant, but the faint tapping of her manicured nails against the folder in front of her betrayed unease. Beside her was Paul Renner, the attorney assigned by the school's insurance board, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his early 50s with short dark hair peppered gray, a clean-shaven face, and sharp brown eyes that missed little. Paul had a reputation for being aggressive in defense, but pragmatic when the odds turned. Margaret called the room to order, her calm yet firm voice filling the silence. "We are gathered today to review allegations of psychological abuse, intimidation, and misconduct against Miss Rowan Kincaid, teacher at Ravenbrook Elementary School. This hearing is to determine whether disciplinary action, including termination, is warranted based on the evidence presented." Cole's jaw tightened, his hand resting lightly on Max's head beneath the table, grounding himself in the steady rhythm of the dog's calm breathing. Elena was the first to speak, her voice steady, though her petite frame seemed smaller beneath the heavy weight of the moment. She explained the recordings made by Oliver Gray, the pattern of Rowan's targeted harassment, and the student's visible emotional decline over the past semester. As she spoke, Carla Mendoza leaned forward, her dark eyes softening with concern. Then Bethany stepped up, laying a set of color-coded charts before the board. Her round glasses caught the glare of the lights as she flipped through photos and injury reports. "These are medical logs documenting bruises, tension headaches, stress-induced rashes, and weight loss," Bethany said, her soft but firm voice carrying to every corner of the room. "Every case lines up precisely with Miss Kincaid's direct interactions with these students." A murmur rippled among the board members. Alan Whitaker leaned toward Margaret and whispered something under his breath, his pen tapping faster now. Next, Harper Taylor spoke, her elegant frame trembling slightly as she gripped the edges of her chair. "My daughter Sophie wakes up from nightmares almost every night," she said softly, her voice breaking midway. "She says she hears Miss Kincaid yelling at her, even when she's home." Daniel Price, seated beside her, clenched his fists tightly. My son Mason refuses to go to school. He says his stomach hurts every day, and now I know why." His deep voice reverberated, carrying both anger and restrained pain. Margaret raised her hand, restoring quiet. "Thank you. Mr. Walker, I understand you have provided a critical piece of evidence." Cole rose from his seat, standing tall, his broad shoulders squaring as he approached the board. He slid his phone across the table, connected to the speakers, and pressed play. Rowan's voice filled the room. Cold, sharp, unfiltered. "If any of those kids open their mouths, I have ways to make them stop." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Carla's lips parted slightly in shock. Alan paused his pen mid-tap. Margaret's expression darkened into quiet disapproval. Rowan's attorney shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat. "With respect, context is important here. But Cole cut him off, his voice controlled but resonant. "Play the next part." Another recording followed. "Lily's already halfway broken. If she tries to talk, I'll make sure she regrets it." The sound was undeniable, every syllable as sharp as a blade. Grace inhaled sharply beside Cole, her slender fingers digging into her scarf as tears welled in her hazel eyes. Elena closed her notebook softly, letting the weight of silence land on Rowan's shoulders. For the first time since the hearing began, Rowan's carefully constructed composure cracked. Her steel blue eyes widened, and the color drained from her face, leaving her pale beneath her flawless makeup. Her hands, once steady, trembled faintly as she gripped the edge of the table. Margaret leaned forward, folding her hands together on the polished wood. "Miss Kincaid, do you have any response to these recordings?" Rowan's lips parted, but no words came. After a long, tense pause, her attorney finally spoke. "Given the content of these recordings, my client has been advised to remain silent until formal proceedings." Margaret nodded once, her voice carrying the weight of finality. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, including documented injuries, eyewitness reports, and verified audio recordings, this board unanimously votes for immediate termination of Miss Rowan Kincaid's employment. Furthermore, we are forwarding this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation under the statutes addressing psychological abuse of minors." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room, parents exchanging stunned looks as Rowan sat frozen in place, her hands tightening around the edges of her folder until her knuckles blanched white. As the board adjourned, Cole gathered his binder and rose, Max standing instantly beside him. Together they walked toward the exit, the weight of weeks of fear and silence lifting slightly with each step. Just outside the door, Rowan stood near the hallway wall, her steel blue eyes meeting Cole's as he approached. But before she could speak, Max stepped forward, his muscular frame tense, ears forward, amber eyes locked on hers. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He didn't need to. The message was clear. Rowan looked away first. For the first time in months, Cole allowed himself a deep, steady breath. The battle wasn't over. Not yet. But this was a victory worth holding on to. 2 months later, Ravenbrook began to awaken from its long, icy slumber. The heavy snowdrifts had melted, revealing patches of emerald green grass across the town. The air was crisp, filled with the faint scent of pine and damp earth, while the distant sound of birdsong replaced the eerie silence that winter had left behind. Outside Ravenbrook Elementary, the once frosted playground now glimmered beneath soft sunlight, and for the first time in many months, the world seemed lighter. Lily Walker, now 9 years old, walked through the school gates with her small navy blue backpack swaying gently against her back. Her long chestnut brown hair, freshly brushed, was neatly tied into 2 soft braids, and clipped just above her ear was a delicate butterfly hairpin, an iridescent blue one that Cole had bought for her last week. It glimmered under the sunlight, a quiet symbol of resilience. For the first time in months, Lily's small shoulders weren't hunched forward. She carried herself differently now, straighter, steadier, lighter. She paused at the entrance of classroom 4B, a place where shadows once clung to the corners like secrets untold. But today, sunlight streamed through the wide windows, dancing across the desks and scattering across the polished floor. Inside, the atmosphere felt warmer, safer, transformed. Not just because Rowan Kincaid was gone, but because someone new now stood at the front of the room. Elena Ruiz, the petite 23-year-old student teacher, who had once silently documented Rowan's cruelty, had officially been appointed as the interim homeroom teacher for Class 4B. Today, she stood confidently before the blackboard in a soft cream blouse tucked into gray trousers, her dark hair tied back in a low ponytail, a gentle smile resting on her face. Her almond-shaped brown eyes, once filled with frustration at being unable to act, now radiated quiet authority and kindness. Elena glanced toward Lily, offering her an encouraging nod. Lily hesitated, then nodded back with a faint smile, slipping into her seat. From 2 rows back, Oliver Gray, his messy brown hair slightly trimmed, his round wire frame glasses perched firmly on his small nose, waved shyly. The boy who once trembled behind his notebook now carried a different confidence. He gave Lily a small, reassuring grin, and this time, instead of lowering her gaze, Lily smiled back, a soft, full smile that reached her gray-blue eyes. It was the first time in months that Oliver had seen her face this peaceful. The rest of the morning passed like sunlight breaking through old clouds. Elena guided the class through lessons with patience and clarity, her voice gentle but steady. Unlike Rowan, she invited questions, praised effort instead of perfection, and noticed the smallest gestures, the raised hands, the nervous hesitations, the quiet successes. She made space for laughter, for small mistakes, for learning without fear. At recess, Lily stepped into the bright schoolyard. The snow had receded into soft, damp patches at the edges of the playground, leaving behind stretches of green where children ran and played. The sun felt warm against her cheeks, and for the first time, the chatter of her classmates didn't sound overwhelming. Suddenly, a loud bark cut through the playful noise, followed by the rhythmic thump of paws against the soft earth. Max, Cole's 5-year-old German shepherd, bounded across the open yard, his muscular frame gleaming beneath the sunlight. His thick black and tan fur rippled with each powerful stride, his ears pricked, amber eyes bright with focus. Clamped gently between his jaws was a worn tennis ball, green fuzz frayed at the edges from weeks of chasing. Max skidded to a playful stop in front of Lily, dropped the ball at her feet, and sat upright, tail wagging expectantly. Lily's laughter, light and unguarded, broke free, a sound Cole hadn't heard in far too long. She crouched down, stroking Max's head as he leaned into her touch, his breath warm and steady. "Okay, Max," she whispered, her small voice carrying a hint of newfound confidence. "Go get it." She tossed the ball, and Max bolted across the yard, his paws kicking up tiny bursts of damp soil before returning with precision, dropping the ball at her shoes once more. Around them, a few of Lily's classmates, Oliver among them, joined in, their laughter carrying across the bright schoolyard. From a distance, Cole Walker leaned casually against the chain-link fence, watching his daughter with quiet pride. Dressed in a plain dark green jacket and sturdy jeans, his rugged features softened as the sunlight highlighted the lines etched by hardship and healing alike. The faint shadows under his hazel eyes had begun to fade, replaced by something steadier, calmer. Standing beside him, Grace Bennett tucked her blonde hair behind one ear, the early spring breeze lifting her pale scarf slightly. She held a takeaway cup of coffee between her slender hands, her hazel eyes locked on Lily's joyous expression. "She's changing," Grace said softly, a small smile touching her lips. Cole nodded, his gaze fixed on Lily as she played. "She's healing," he replied, his voice quiet but steady. When the final school bell rang, Lily ran up to Cole, her small boots splashing lightly in a shallow puddle as she threw her arms around his waist. Max padded up beside them, pressing against Lily's legs protectively. Cole ruffled her braids gently before walking her to the truck, Grace following close behind. That evening, the family gathered in Cole's cozy kitchen, where the soft orange glow of the pendant lights warmed the walls. On the wooden dining table sat plates of freshly cooked spaghetti, a recipe Amelia, Lily's late mother, had perfected years ago. Grace stood by the counter, grating Parmesan cheese, while Lily helped set out forks and napkins, her tiny hands steady and sure. Cole stirred the sauce slowly, his hazel eyes reflecting both the present moment and lingering memories. The scent of garlic and tomatoes filled the air, carrying with it echoes of Amelia's laughter from long ago. For a brief moment, the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was comforting, familiar. As they sat around the table, Lily twirled spaghetti around her fork, her cheeks rosy, her gray-blue eyes bright as she told Cole about Max chasing the tennis ball and Oliver finally beating her in math. Cole listened, his chest swelling with quiet gratitude, his throat tightening as he smiled through the ache in his heart. When dinner ended, Cole stepped onto the porch with Max at his side, the soft spring breeze carrying faint scents of wet soil and pine. Max settled into his usual spot at the top step, ears alert, scanning the quiet street with unspoken vigilance. Cole leaned against the wooden railing, hands in his pockets, his gaze drifting toward the horizon, where the last hints of sunlight bled into twilight. The past was still there, carved deep into their memories, but for the first time in months, the future felt possible. Behind him, inside their small, warm home, Lily's laughter carried softly through the open window, and at his side, Max, silent, steadfast, unyielding, kept his quiet watch. It wasn't forgetting, it was living. Sometimes, the greatest miracles aren't loud. They don't come with thunder, lightning, or grand signs from the heavens. They come quietly, in the form of love, courage, and the strength to keep going. For Lily, healing didn't happen overnight. It came through the unseen hands of kindness, a father's sacrifice, a loyal K9's silent protection, and the unwavering support of people who refuse to look away. And maybe, just maybe, that's how God works. Through us. Through the small choices we make, the compassion we give, and the battles we dare to fight for one another. As you watch this story, take a moment to reflect on the miracles in your own life, the second chances, the people who stood by you, the quiet blessings you didn't see at first. May God watch over you, your family, and every child who still needs a little more light in their world. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and share it so others can see it too. Tell us your thoughts, your prayers, or even your own story in the comments. We're listening. And if you believe that every child deserves safety, love, and hope, subscribe to our channel so we can keep telling stories that matter. Because sometimes, being here, caring for each other, is the miracle.